of portion distortion. Okay, so clearly we're going to be talking about portion control. So with that, I don't want to waste any time with the housekeeping. We're going to kind of move past that and get right into the heart of what we're talking about today. Okay. So let's talk about, oh, my little picture is gone. What's been happening? Well, I did have a little graphic there because we're talking about basically three areas of where we've had portion distortion. Can everybody hear me? Can you all just kind of click in and let me know, make sure everybody's with me? Yes, yes? Okay, great, thanks. All right, so first we have restaurants, and then from there we went into, we have fast food restaurants, then we went into supermarkets, and then we're going into the home. So those are the three areas that we're going to cover and talk about what's been going on that's brought us to this point of portion distortion. Okay, so when we start thinking about restaurants, this started back in the 1970s, okay, where there was the advent of fast food places that popped up, and this was a way of people getting fast, easy, cheap food just for a few bucks. And in general, people were picking up what? Burgers, fries, and a drink. Then these fast food places started to realize that the fries and the drinks were super cheap. So for just pennies more, you could get a larger amount. And so then they started offering these kind of value options or value sizes, right? And slowly over time, that led to the supersizing, although that wasn't the phrase until a decade or so later. But then it became a value meal, and people began to just put that together with, oh, I get more bang for my buck. I'm getting a value meal. And then fast forward, about 20 years goes by, and then we start getting all these fast casual places like Applebee's, Chipotle, Panera Bread, and then they started wanting in on the action and said, how can we offer these value options? So they wanted to create the perception of more value. So they started differentiating themselves, with more food for less money, kind of in a family setting. So, you could save the whole family time and money and enjoy a time out together. And that's how they marketed it. Then we found that the supermarkets wanted to pick up on this, and they wanted a piece of the action as well. So what did they do? They started introducing a wide variety of products called generic products, right? So they wanted to compete. Their main competitor was the brand names. So they realized, though, we can't compete with price, but we can compete with size. So it became a size war. So they were working with the brands, they were competing against the brands and saying, hey, we're going to give you more value added by giving you more for the same amount of money, or maybe even a little less. Well, eventually, that desire that we as a consumer started to push forward, that desire for more bang for our buck, really kind of led to this whole larger size for less money concept. And then it finally caught up with us behind closed doors through getting into our homes and making dishes and bowls and glassware much larger, sometimes by as much as even 36%. And then that kind of set off this thing of like, well, maybe I'm not eating enough at home because, for instance, if you look at your average size dinner plates, does anybody know what size your dinner plates are? Have you even thought about this? Yeah, 8 inches, 9 inches. I'm really surprised. Yeah, Kristen, 12. That's what my dinner plates are. They're 12 inches. If you guys have 8 or 9 inch plates, I'm excited for you. An 8-inch salad plate, yeah. The salad plates, yes, but dinner plates, back in the day, dinner plates used to be 10 inches. which is now what most salad plates are, to be honest. And most dinner plates are around 12 inches, so it's like a foot of food. You can think of it in those terms, which is kind of gross. But you can see the distortion picture starting to come up. And, so what happened is there was kind of the supersizing of our flatware and, and our dishware. And this all came out of kind of the economic demand for wanting more bang for our buck. And so what happened is we created kind of this exaggerated consumption in order to reconcile what we think we need to be eating at home. So basically, where did this all lead us? This led us to the supersizing of America and kind of the obesity and overweight rates that we have now. So I want to bring you to the next slide. So let's just take a look at these for a second. I'm giving you a breakfast, lunch, and dinner sample of like when people went out. These are kind of some common breakfast meals, lunch meals, dinner meals. So if for breakfast, and we'll compare it 20 years ago to now. I'm going to give you a stat that I think you're going to find a little bit shocking. So on average, people go out for breakfast. What do they get? They get a bagel, some coffee with milk, sugar. Lunch, 2 slices of pepperoni pizza and some soda. Dinner, chicken Caesar salad and soda. So thinking about it in terms of 20 years ago, here would be some common going out meals, right? Compare it to and lay that over the portion sizes that we have of today. And in one day, you would consume about 1,600 more calories than if you had those typical foods 20 years ago. But here's the more frightening stat. Over the course of 1 year, if you consumed that kind of meal plan daily for 1 year using the portions that we have now, you could end up consuming more than 500,000 calories, or the equivalent, which would be the equivalent of 143 pounds. So I want you to just let that sink in for a second. That's really shocking, and that I wanted you to have this statistic because I wanted you to be shocked by how grossly exaggerated our portions have become, all stemming from the root of consumers wanting more bang for their buck. Anybody have any thoughts on that? Okay. We're going to move on then. All right, so let's talk about a portion versus a serving. I'm sure a number of you are probably thinking, well, what's the difference between a portion and serving? I keep hearing those words, but I don't really understand what they mean. And, really, sometimes they're the same and sometimes they're not. But in general, a portion is how much food that you eat to feel satisfied, okay? And it's usually 100% under your control, as opposed to a serving, which tends to be the amount of food that you'd find on the nutrition facts label. And it's generally a standardized unit of measure. So it'd be 1 cup, 2 tablespoons, or 1 slice. But there are a number of things that are kind of getting in the way of folks understanding exactly what a healthy portion is, or and understanding why they are the way they are. And there's a number of reasons for that. So one of them is because we just don't know what it is. It varies from food item to food item and food manufacturer to food manufacturer. Then when we go out to eat, right, restaurants, they kind of give us a pre-meal, whether it's bread or breadsticks, rolls, appetizers, chips and salsa. So we're already getting a meal before we've even ordered our meal, right? And that throws things off because that adds a lot of sodium, sugar, fat, and calories. Some meals, as I'm sure you've seen, are enough really for 2 people, but they serve it on a big old platter, and that's 1 serving. And a lot of convenience foods are actually packaged and priced so you get the lower pricing, but you get, huge packaging because people want more bang for their buck. And I'll just say one other thing. I don't know if you all have experienced this. Maybe you can tell me. But I know that sometimes if I go to a new place, and I'm just kind of conditioned to do this, I'll look when they serve me, I'll see what the plate looks like, and if it looks a little skimpy, because we get skewed. I look at it and I'm like, oh, wow, those are really cheap portions. Like, oh, they don't serve a lot of food. Have any of you done that? Because we've all gotten, the point of my sharing this is that we've all gotten used to more is better. So if I don't see that my plate is completely filled up, I'm like, oh, that's kind of cheap, or oh, they don't give you enough food. Has anybody else experienced that? Yeah, right? I mean, so think about it. It's because we've been conditioned to expect more, and that's not normal. So just something else to think about. Okay, I really like these cartoons. We're going to look at a number of these, but I'm sure that most of you are familiar with something called the Clean Plate Club. And basically this cartoon kind of says it all, what this is about. So basically it's saying that you grew up with it, Ravi? A lot of us did. You're not alone. And basically what this is saying is that people who subscribe to the Clean Plate Club, they will eat 92% of what's put on their plate. So basically the adage is, if you serve it, I will eat it. Okay? And that's not really what we should be doing. This comes actually from, you can see the Food and Brand Lab. It's Cornell University. They do a lot of studies on the psychology of food. And what researchers found out in part with this was that part of the problem is, and why they think most people will do this, is because when we serve ourselves, we already know in our head how much of that food we want to eat, or even if somebody else is serving you, they're serving you based on how much they want you to eat. So if this were, your mom's putting it down on the plate, so she probably put a larger portion of vegetables on there than you may have wanted to eat as a kid. Why? Because that's what she wanted to have you eat. So there is kind of this subconscious thing that goes on that says, I'm going to put on my plate as much as I want to eat of that food, if that makes sense. Does that make sense to everybody? Well, think of it in terms of a buffet, right? For anybody who still goes to buffets, let's say a Chinese buffet, how much of those spare ribs do you put on? I'm not putting on 2 ribs. Why? Because that's one of my favorites. So I think you can kind of understand a little bit, how this works with when we serve ourselves and, or what's on our plate, or if somebody else is serving us. A lot of times it tends to be based on what they want you to consume, or if I'm serving myself, I'm going to serve myself certain foods more than maybe others because I already know how much of that food I want to eat. How do you think we can change that? Anybody have any ideas on that? How you think you could change that? Jennifer, using smaller plates. Yes, and we're going to talk, it's funny you say that, we're going to, in another couple of slides, we're going to talk about that. Tracy, that's why I bought smaller plates. Very good. Luann, meal planning. Robbie, eat more frequently. Yep. Tracy, adding more vegetables. All excellent ideas, right? Yeah, we have to find a way to skirt around this whole issue because sometimes we may not have a choice. If you're out and you're out in certain company or certain cultures, you don't even have control of the plate. Somebody else does. So I think kind of having some of these tips and strategies to help those workarounds, really important. Those are all really great. Okay, let's move on. So now we have something called the small plates lose weight. So as you look at these 2 plates, outside of the color, what do you notice about these 2 plates? What stands out? Less meat and starch. Okay, that is true. What else? The amount is different. Yes. Take a step back from the specifics of the plate. What do you notice? What about the size of the plates? Are they the same size? They're not the same size. But all the other things that you're saying kind of come into that whole concept of small plates, the food is kind of relative to the plate. So on the larger plate, we have more food. And on the smaller plate, we have less food. And this is a really interesting concept. So the people at Cornell did this study too, and it's called the Delboeuf illusion. Okay, and basically what it says is people tend to overserve on large plates and underserve on small plates. So for those of you that are already eating off the small plates, then you probably understand this concept. You know, you're not going to put the same amount of food on the large plate as a small plate because it doesn't fit. So this is kind of, it's really simple in concept, but I mean, I think it's a fabulous subconscious kind of thing that a lot of us don't really pay attention to. We just are drawn immediately to, if my plate is that big, then I must fill it, right? And then so what we were talking about before, this all kind of comes into how our plateware and our glassware has gone up to 36% larger in size. So then we have a tendency to fill it, and then that skews everything as far as how we kind of how we perceive how much we should be eating or how much we need to eat. So I wanted to give you another example. It's not on this, but it goes along with small plates. So researchers did this study where they took campers at a health and fitness camp, and they gave half the group larger bowls for cereal, and they gave half the group smaller bowls. And they noticed that those who had the larger bowls ate 16% more cereal. So again, think about it with this concept. Larger bowl, I need to fill it. But what's more interesting is that when they asked them to report out, to estimate how much they thought they ate, the people who ate in the larger bowls actually estimated 7% lower than the people who ate in the small bowls, which basically tells us two things. One, it suggests that not only could larger dinnerware cause us to serve ourselves more and eat more, but that we can do it without even noticing it, and then end up, tricking us into believing that we've eaten less. So this is really kind of a very interesting concept that I think we need to be more mindful of when we're eating, what we're eating off of, and like how big it is. I've tried, and I continue to try to, as I break plates and have to buy more dishes, that finding smaller dishware, because it makes a huge difference. I don't want to eat off of big dishes because I do fall into this. I can very easily fall into it. If you put, a little 4-ounce piece of chicken on an 8-inch plate or a 10-inch plate as opposed to a 12-inch plate, which is going to make it look like it's more food? The smaller plate. You just feel, and then you psychologically you feel more satiated, like, oh. But when it's like a little dot on this big plate, you feel like, I'm not eating enough. What a jip. So, and then your natural tendency is to eat more. Any questions so far? Any comments? Okay, moving on. Okay, so why do we overeat? Well, one is the simple answer, because we can. And the second one has to do with two systems that govern our decision-making process. One of them is called the limbic system. which is our subconscious, and it's kind of more emotional, and it relies on present opportunities, right? And then we have the analytic system, which weighs the courses of action more consciously. So, for instance, most of us know that we're going to have enough food to eat next month, but rational thought is frequently overridden and pushed aside by the limbic, me now. I need to eat now, way of thinking. And so, in general, we tend to be products of both of those systems. Plus, then you have to factor in, cultural norms and traditions, which can kind of make overeating a very complex thing. Can any of you offer any examples of either one of these ways of thinking that you've experienced? No? I mean, just think of in terms of impulse buying, right? So at the register, they put all those little goodies up there. Why? Because you're waiting online and you have nothing to do. So, hey, this is a great place for a candy bar. It's a great place for a magazine. And if I'm standing there reading it while I'm getting ready to check out, I may just throw it in my cart and say, yeah, I'll take this too. Or you may say, with the little snacky stuff they have up there, I'm hungry. I've been out all day. Let me just have something to hold me over until I get home. They're working off that limbic system of relying on present opportunities and now. Okay, I want to share with you a couple of these cartoons because I think they're really funny, but there's a lot of truth to them. So the first one here is people take away twice as many candies when they're on the desk than when they're 6 feet away. I think we've all probably been in an office environment somewhere, you may be in one now, where there are boxes of donuts that are just 2 feet away from us, or they're in a common area that everybody, including yourself, passes by 12,000 times. It's a lot harder to resist that, especially when they're there all day. They're right in front of you. Or if you do keep things on your desk, it's much easier. The point is that it's much easier and much more tempting and more likely that you will, and actually it's 71% more likely that you will grab the candy if it's on your desk than if it's in your drawer. So kind of out of sight, out of mind is definitely a trick here. Let's take a look at the other one. Tall glasses make everyone pour 30% less. So again, some studies have been done where when people are faced with two types of glasses, the tall, slender glass and the short, wide glass, and you can have the same amount of fluid in each one, they will consistently grab for the short, wide glass because it looks like it has more in it, right? It's an illusion. But generally, like this says, tall glasses make everyone pour 30% less. Not because there is 30% less in there, but just the perception is that it doesn't hold as much, so you won't pour as much. Descriptive labels increase sales by 27%, and they make food taste better. So this is another way that, marketing, especially when we're out in restaurants, can really, get people to eat way more. You may be stuffed, and they'll come around with the dessert menu. Oh my God, can't eat another bite. Really? Okay. And then they read it and they say, this is Belgian Black Forest cake, double chocolate cake. Belgian Black double forest double chocolate cake. Whatever. Okay. Can't read it. It's really small on my screen. But the point is, if you hear that, you could have eaten enough. Fine, but now when somebody, gives you this amazing chocolate cake with all those different adjectives that sound fabulous, guess what? I always have room for more. And then you've got the poor schleppy guy over there that's just eating plain chocolate cake, and he's like, mine was just okay, and I'm still hungry. And then you've got the waiter in the background that's like, too bad these guys don't know they're eating the same exact cake. It's perception. That's the whole point of what I'm trying to say. It's really about perception. And people will consume more based on what they think they're getting. All right, so lastly, I just want to end with some tips and strategies. So this goes to the candy on the desk kind of thing. Out of sight, out of mind. Vary locations for temptation foods. At home, don't leave things out on the counter. Put them away in shelves or in the refrigerator, in the pantry somewhere. And try putting out fresh fruit in a bowl. You'll tend to eat more fruit if it's sitting on the counter in front of you than if it's in the refrigerator. When eating out, split an entree or ask for a to-go box and pack your meal as soon as it's brought to the table. Don't even wait. Just get rid of that other half and save it for tomorrow. Portion control at home. Serve food on individual plates instead of putting serving dishes on the table. It's just, it's a difference between having a buffet and a plated meal. Don't eat straight from the package. Portion out in snack bags or bowls to avoid overeating. Most foods that we eat straight from if we were to eat them straight from the package, whether it's chips, it's nuts, it's seeds, whatever it is, we'll eat 20 to 30% more if we eat it from the original packaging rather than breaking it out into smaller snack-sized portions. Replace 12-inch plates with 10-inch plates. When you do that, you can reduce consumption by 22%. And the 20% rule, this is kind of interesting. So take what you would normally put out on your plate and then remove what you think would be 20% of that before you start to eat. Because there's been research on this that has shown that when people remove what they perceive to be as 20%, they don't realize it. Like when they're eating it, they're not feeling like, oh, I wish I had that extra amount. 20% is a sweet spot, but when they've tried upping it to 30%, people feel that, and then they feel denied, and it doesn't work. But 20% seems to be the sweet spot. So that's something that you could try to help with portion control. Again, it's all psychological. And lastly, with glasses, we said think slender, right? Because those who pour into a wide glass tend to pour 30% more. And, just as a reminder, for everything that we've talked about today, it's really important that you work with, all of your care providers to see how you can best incorporate some of these, tips and strategies and this information into your current plan, which, will eventually change over time. But so some of this may not be applicable to all of you right now, or only certain pieces of it. But I wanted to try to give everybody an overview of just some basics. Where did we get this whole portion distortion concept? Where did it come from? And, what are some kind of neat workarounds? And also a little insight into the psychology of how we can eat more or less depending on our environment. So with that, does anybody have any questions? Or comments? Okay. Oh. What's everybody talking about here? I kind of lost track of what. What are we talking about with the dessert tray? Is there a sweet spot concerning how long to wait after eating but still feeling hungry before getting a little more? Robbie, I think that's a great question. And yeah, there is. You generally want to give yourself 20 minutes from the time that you've taken your last bite, because that's the time it takes for the brain and the stomach to communicate with each other that you're full. You're not going to digest your food in 20 minutes, but that signaling between those two organs takes about 20 minutes after you've eaten to really get that, for your stomach to tell your brain we're good. So after you finish your meal, sitting back, drinking some water, just, having some conversation or finding something else to do, but you've got to give your body some time to just send the signal. Yeah, so 20 minutes generally. That seems to be the sweet spot. Anybody else? Well, I'm hoping that everybody has been able to take something away from this, a little trick or a tip or some information maybe you didn't know before. I just love the whole psychology aspect with the glassware and changing the plate size. I continue to work on that, but I also do find that it's harder to find plates outside of that stuff that doesn't really break too much, where they're small. They all seem to be really large, so that's kind of a frustration for me, but there's science behind it, so just kind of keep that in mind. And if no one else has any questions, then I just want to thank everybody for participating and hanging in there with me with my technical difficulties, and just to have a great day. And we'll talk again soon.